Okay, Assalamualaikum and hi everyone. We will start with chapter 6 about OD intervention strategies. So in this chapter is actually, we refer to the 5 stages of OD programs. It's actually referring to the stage 4. The first stage, it is anticipating the needs for change. Followed with the second stage. Third stage is diagnostic process, and the fourth stage is referring to strategies and techniques. So we are at this stage. So this chapter gonna cover about the strategies and also interventions. So after diagnosing the problems, that means after the third stage, diagnostic process. So the diagnosing is actually to identify the problems that exist in the organizations, and also to after this diagnosing, it is important to select the strategy. That means the techniques and also the technology for change. So it is not enough to identify the problems or the issues that faced by the organizations, but also how to overcome the problems. What are the strategies, that means the techniques and technology needed for change in order to solve the problems. So strategies actually referring to the overall plans and directions in the OD programs. So the type of the strategy depends on the problem that been diagnosed. So let's say the nature depend on the nature of the problems. So from the diagnosing, from the result of the diagnostic process, then the organization can choose or can select what type of strategies and interventions to follow. So OD strategy is a plan for integrating different activities, different organizations' activities in order to accomplish the objective. So there are several major categories of OD strategies. So in other words, there are 3 basic strategies that the organization can choose. But according to the study, it is not enough to choose one of the strategies, but this need to be used in combination. So, but we're going to discuss one by one so that it is clear what is meant by structural, what is meant by technological or technical, what is meant by behavioral. So structural, start with first structural. So these 3 are the basic strategies, basic organizational change or OD strategies. So structural strategies are normally emphasize or focus on the organizational design or organizational structure or the workflow. For example, in the organization, let's say the problem that exists in the organization is because of the bureaucratic style of the organizations. So bureaucratics mean when the organizations grow, when the organization become larger, their management, their system need to be organized, need to be systematic. So normally they need to follow bureaucratics way of managing things. So bureaucratic making the organization become taller because they add layers to the structure. So when we talk about the structure, we talk about the structure of the organization. So this will explain who report to whom. So let's say the employees. Employees need to report to their manager. The manager need to report to the other managers, to the superior in terms of their managers level, and so forth. So who report to whom and how the work is structured. So when we talk about structure, it's normally focusing on the organizational structure, and it's also involved with the who report to whom. That means the employees report to which managers, and that manager report to another managers, middle managers, and the middle managers report to the top managers, for example. So next is technological strategy. So technological strategies are normally, if let's say in the organizations, the problems for the inefficiency or for the problem for the low in the profitability, maybe because of the technology use is not helping the organization to produce more products, for example. So they realize about the needs for the technology. So they need to come up with this strategy, technological strategy, where they need to implement new developments, that means new technological innovations. So maybe they need to acquire new manufacturing equipments and computerized information system. So why they need this? Because maybe the technology or the machine that they have already outdated. Many competitors already use advanced technologies. So in order to cope with the competitors, in order to produce more product in the short period of times, but still with the quality and also the competitive price, they need to acquire, they need to buy the new technology. So maybe that's the strategy in order to improve, to overcome the problem that they're facing now. So we call this technological strategy or technical strategy. So that's the second strategy. The third strategy is behavioral strategy. So this strategy, normally if they realize that their employees or their managers or the problem that they face are because of the human resources. Maybe employees, maybe managers. So one, for example, because of so strict in terms of power that's been given to the managers. So this restrict the employees to decide on their own. Let's say that's the problems. So the strategy, in order to improve the situation, they need to give, the managers or the management need to give more empowerment to the lower level employees. When it comes to the decision making, they do not have to refer to their managers or top managers, for example. So according to the research, there are lots of benefits, lots of good outcome of empowerment. So maybe they need to come up with this strategy if they realize their organization experience of facing this problem. And another thing, developing strategies may include planning activities to resolve the difficulties that they are facing now. Maybe another way is to do activities or to come up with the ideas on how to build on their strength or their opportunity, their strengths, for example. This could increase the organization effectiveness and efficiency. So in order to improve the problems, overcome the problem, they need to plan activities, not only to give empowerment to the employees, or to the lower level employees, but need to do some activities, planning activities to resolve the difficulties. From the strategy, the OD process then can select the intervention technique. So if you refer to the textbook, you will realize that strategy comes first and then interventions. So from strategy, the OD process moves to selecting the intervention techniques and technology. So the intervention techniques are the specific means, the specific goals, the specific way, activities and program by which change goal can be attained. So in order to attain the goal, they need intervention techniques. So these are the basic strategy to change: structural, technical, and behavioral. So organizational structure, this is referring to the first basic strategy, structural. So this organizational structure is very important because it provides the framework for the organization to follow. This also will relate the element in the organization to another elements in the organizations. So structural strategies change the organization design by modifying the line of authority. Let's say in the organizations, they realize that the lack of the productivity of employees because of too many managers the employee needs to report to. Or maybe because there are too many managers but not employees. So maybe that's the problem. So what they need to do, they need to modify the structural strategies. They need to modify using structural strategies. They need to modify the line of authority. The line of authority, whether these employees need to report to the first line managers or need to report to the CEO, for example. And also they need to modify the span of control. So there are two types of span of control, wide and narrow. So wide span of control will result in wider or flatter organizations. Flat or tall span of control will lead to taller style of organizations. Modern organizations or organic organizations are moving toward flatter style of organizations. That means moving toward wide span of control. And also arrangement of the work function. This is arrangement of the job responsibility of the employees. So when we talk about structure, in order to restructure, in order to change, to modify, we call it restructure. So restructure of the cooperation is actually make them more competitive. So in order to become more competitive, the organization normally do restructuring of their organizations, maybe change a little bit the positions of the managers, of the departments, of the structures, organization structure, and so forth. So this actually is a major goal of many corporations, over the past 2 decades. So because of the global markets, as we study in this chapter, in this course, whatever happens outside the organizations, in the environments will affect the organization, especially in today organizations. Because of the globalizations, because of the technological eruptions, because of the market and so forth, whatever happens in the other country gonna affect in other countries. So it has repercussions in other countries. So nowadays, whatever happens between Russia and Ukraine have impacts on other countries, even though they are not really support or against these two countries. Still the repercussions gonna affect all countries, all people. So when we come to the markets, to the business environment, in order to remain competitive, sometimes the organization needs a major restructuring to their business. One of the ways to restructure the organization is through downsizing. Normally, company downsize because they want to improve the efficiency, to improve the effectiveness, maybe because that their strategy. So downsizing is associated with restructuring, because downsizing is, in other words, restructured because they restructured their organizations. So downsizing also is synonymous with layoff. Why? Because if the organization downsize, they reduce in size, that means they also will reduce some of the employees. So when they reduce the employees, this term we call it layoff. That's different from firing the employees. Layoff means the employees been laid off, been terminated, not because of their fault, but because of the organizations. Maybe they not need the employees because of they want to save maybe the operating cost and so forth. So for the employees who got laid off, they will have a chance later to reapply to work for these organizations. But if, let's say, the employees are being fired, the chance to be re-employed are quite difficult. So restructuring, some organization, they restructure in order to improve their organizations or their operations. But restructuring is not a panacea for or the solution for improving the organizations. However, according to the research, restructuring normally associated with a positive outcome. So organizations who are having a problem, if they restructured, normally they're gonna have a positive outcome, but it's not always a good solution. According to the study, longitude study, longitude means the study been done for a long time. Maybe they collect the data 5 years ago, and then after the next 5 years, they collect again the data, and then the next 5 years, they collect again the data, for example. So they will compare from one time another time whether is there any differences in the result in the result of the study. So that's the longitude. And so they found out that if the organization continues doing these reorganizations, it's going to have harmful effects on the firms. So even though restructuring is good, but if it is continuously doing for a long time, so it's also going to have a harmful effects on the performance. So another structural changes, still under the structural strategy. If let's say the organizations think that the problem with their performance or the problems that faced by the organization maybe because of too many managers but small numbers of employees, so they need to remove some of the layers in the organization. That means they need to remove these managers, because sometimes too many managers in the organizations are not good, because the organization need to pay them higher salary compared to the normal employees. So sometimes in order to reduce operating costs and so forth, they remove the layers in the organizations. Sometimes because of not enough managers, especially when the organization grow, become larger, so they need to have more systematic way of dealing with the management, so they need to add more layers to the organizations. So it depends on their objective. Some organization, they remove the layers. Some organization, they add more layers to this hierarchy to the organizations. So adding the layers, we become taller. The organization will become taller. But nowadays, typically many of the organizations try to reduce layers in the hierarchy in the organizations, because according to the study, flatter style of organizations that means is more effective, is more organic, is more modern style of this organization, because it could reduce many of the bureaucratic unnecessary layers in the organization, so it become more effective. So changes also can involve decentralizations and centralization. When we talk about decentralization or centralization, we talk about the decision making. So decentralizations, let's say the organization, even though they are larger style of organizations, like for example, some organizations, they are large, they have many branches. So when they have many branches, many regional branches here and there, so sometimes the decision need to be made at the HQ. But there are there are many problems if decision making need to be made at the HQ or at the central. So many organizations, in order to avoid problems, they decentralize their decision making, where the manager at the branches also can make decisions whenever regarding the operation. So they give autonomy, they give empowerment to the employees to decide to make a decision. Centralized, that means the decision making must be made at the HQ by the top managers, by the top managements, normally by the CEO. This is normally true for merger. Merger means when one company merge with another company, so the operations, decision making, so forth, normally centralized at the HQ, at the top. So for merger, a lot of planning and efforts need to be done in order to make it successful. So in other words, in order for organization to become more effective, they need to change their structures to more decentralized style of organization. So technological approach or technical strategy, normally the organizations, when they realize that they need technology in order to become more effective, to become more efficient, especially if the businesses deal with the productions, for example, manufacturing, in order to produce more products, if they're using just human, resource, sometimes human resource, because they need to sleep, so they cannot work 24 hours, even though they are regular shift. But this is still difficult for some company if they want to produce a product 24 hours. So sometimes they need help from the machines, from the robots, for example, to increase their production. So sometimes the organization implement new technology in order to overcome the problems they are facing, for example, in terms of productivity. New computer system and machinery were brought into the organizations. So change in machinery, or what we call it technical approach to change, referring to change in machinery, in the method, automations, and job design. So technological change actually could help the organization, not only the organization, but also the employees to become more productive. For organizations, nowadays, many organizations increasingly implementing a sophisticated computerized management information system. If you go to any MNC, for example, any factories, rarely they use the manual, the human energy 100%. So normally they will use the machine, the more sophisticated machine could increase the production even more. So for the employees, the technology could help them with their job and also in dealing with the customer. So, for example, Dell bought a robotic control production line. So, because human resource, if let's say they hire employees, 20 employees may have problem with well-being, with welfare, and so forth. They can work 24 hours. So, for robotic control production lines, they can use the robot 24 hours and they don't even need to be paid. So this may be more efficient. Of course, they are expensive, but in the long term, they are more efficient. So so Dell bought this machine or also technology to build a personal computer. So they could, produce more with still at a competitive price. So because of that, maybe they could get more market share compared to the competitor. So behavioral approach is also called behavioral strategy. Is emphasized more on the use of human resources. Maybe nowadays when we talks about we talks about producing products to be more efficient. So maybe many managers focusing or concentrate more on technological and mechanical capacities, and they often neglect human asset. That means human resources, because technology, they may think that's more efficient, because human being you need they need to be their welfare need to be well taken care of, their well-being need to be considered. So the organization cannot simply ask the employees to do something that's beyond their capacity. So for machines, for technology, sometimes they can make use at their fullest potential 24 hours. So because of that, many managers concentrate more on their technology and ignore the human assets. So actually, better utilization of human resources could be improved if the organization could improve or could help the employees in terms of increasing their morale. Increasing their morale mean improve their job satisfactions, their working conditions, motivation, and so forth. And also commitment of the employees. Commitment maybe giving more or maybe good salaries, taking care of their well-being or their welfare, and so forth. So if employees have higher morale and motivations, they could achieve organizational goal. Even though maybe the organization may think that they only need more technology, but without human being, without employees, who gonna monitor the machines, all these things. So they still need human resources. So when employees' morale and motivations are at their fullest, they could be able to achieve the goal of the organizations. So when their personal resources and talented are fully used, then they could be able to achieve their performance. That means their moral, motivation, and commitment need to be well taken care of. So traditionally, OD normally associates with the behavioral strategies. So if you refer to OD from the chapter 1 chapter until now, we talk about employees identify the problems, diagnosing the problems. All those actually behavioral approach or deal with the use of human resources. So all the programs, many of the programs employees or organizational members need to diagnose the problems, and from diagnosing the problems need to develop their own problem solutions. Sometimes with the OD practitioner, or the practitioner trains the employees, the members, to diagnose the problems and also to come up with the solution on their own, of course with the help of the OD practitioner. But later, when the contract is finished, then members or employees need to do their own OD programs so that they could be able to continuously improve their organizations. So the flow of the OD process start from, of course, first identifying the problems, and then they need to diagnose the problems, whether it is the real problems and what actually the opportunity for change. Is there any opportunity, or how to overcome the problems? And then they set the objective to achieve the goal. They need to solve the problems. And they decide what are the strategies to follow, and then they select the techniques or intervention techniques. Example of the intervention techniques such as goal setting, confrontation meeting, survey feedback. So survey feedback is more or less like you do the survey, you collect the data, you analyze the result, and then you draw the conclusions. But you need to give the feedbacks to the clients. In OD, you need to give the feedback to the clients, and whether the clients agree with the feedbacks, and then if not, they have to collect the data again. So total quality management or team building, this normally used by many organizations. For example, if they realize there is some problem with the unity among the colleagues in the organizations, they sometimes do family day, team building activities at the weekend with the other employees. So this actually could revitalize the organizations, their members, in improving their organization. So integration of strategy, historically, OD, when we talk about OD programs, only use behavioral oriented interventions. That means they're focusing on employees, how to diagnose the problem, how to solve the problems. But rarely they look at the technical or structural. So today, the trends of OD is to deal with the total organizations through the integrations of all these, not just the behavioral strategy. So the integration is better because according to research, if the organization use the combination of the strategies and also the combination of intervention techniques, it will be more effective compared to use one strategy and one technique of intervention. So for all these strategies to be successful, they must consider also the interdependencies among the various sub-elements, that mean the various departments, because one department may need to work or deal with the other department if they focus on one department without asking cooperation from other departments. Maybe it's very hard, or maybe it is temporary solutions. So it is important to use, to consider interdependency among the various elements in the organization. So a change in one subsystem, we're going to have impact on the other subsystem. That's why it is important to use interdependency in the organizations. So a comprehensive approach need to consider all these strategies. So we need to use in OD programs, it is important to use the comprehensive approach involving technological, structural, and also behavioral. So as you refer to this integrated approach, these are the strategy, behavioral, structural, and technological. So for behavioral, this actually what they need to do to change their attitudes and also their values for the employees. If the employees want to change, but they do not want to change their attitude, their values, very difficult, the change will be successful. So this, if they could change this, the new behavior will appear, will result. So normally it will lead to improved performance. For structural strategy, that's mean referring to a structure design of the organization, change in the structure, change in the design. So this will result in a new relationship either amongst the departments or among the employees in the organization. Also will lead to improved performance. For technological strategy, maybe the technology that the organization having at the moment is outdated or need to be need to be improved or need to be changed or replaced. So change in the productions and method to become more efficient. So will lead to the new process, new workflow and so forth. So this will also believe result in improved performance. So that's the integration. So if let's say the organization only use structural strategy, maybe they could improve this part, but not this part and this part. So it is important to use the comprehensive approach of integrated approach to change. So the iceberg analogy, this is very important. So because after we diagnose the problems, diagnosing is actually based on the analogy of an iceberg. So iceberg, as you can see, the top one, the surface, is bigger. If you see the iceberg, you normally rarely see the hidden part. Just see the top one. Sometimes it looks small, but underneath maybe it's bigger. So many of the ship, hit this iceberg. They didn't realize it's a big iceberg. So that's the metaphor for this diagnosis. So let's say this diagnosis a change strategy. So the iceberg consists of two parts: the outward part, the one that you see on the surface, and then the covered part, the hidden part, or the subsurface, the below the water one. So the outward one or the surface one that you easily observe, it is smaller than the hidden one. So this one is, for example, organizational structure and policy. The covered one, the hidden one, the one below the surface is, for example, pattern of communication, trust. This is more bigger. So if let's say the diagnosis only look at the outward one, on the surface one, so many of the issues regarding the problem that facing by the organizations will not be able to be resolved. So it is important for the diagnosis to look at this surface, outward and covered. So as you can see here, the outward one is referring to the formal organizations. The covered one, the hidden one, is referring to the informal organizations. So they are more important. They have many things that is hidden that we do not see, we rarely observe, we rarely realize. So if let's say the diagnosis only examine the visible one, the outward aspect, the one that you can see, then and ignore the hidden one, so you ignore many of the powerful one, many of the important one. So how to make the change successful? If you just come up with a strategy, if the organization only come up with the problems that they want to solve is only outwards, not the covered one. So essential in any change program to consider all possible problem areas, whether it is outwards or covered, whether it is hidden or obvious. Especially in order for the strategy to be successful, they need to look at the above part, covered and outwards. So the iceberg metaphor, the iceberg analogy, point to the outward and covered aspect of the organizations. So outwards normally referring to the formal, covered referring to the informal system that largely hidden. So this is the one that important to be diagnose their problems. So this the most troublesome part of the organizations. So normally the cause of the problem comes from the covered ones. So traditionally this hidden domain are not examined at all. So how to solve the problem is the diagnosis is not being done on this part. So the recognition that the informal organizations activities exist and therefore it has a powerful influence on other organizational activities. So it is important to examine how these, the covered one, the hidden one, have an impact on the other activities, and organization also need to deal with this change in this hidden part. For example, culture, politics, power represent much of the informal organizations, much of the hidden parts that is not obviously seen. So structural, technology, and behavioral strategies do not exist in isolation. That means you cannot just focus on structural or technology or behavior alone. Need to focus all in once. So technology alone is not the answer to attain the quality improvements. So in order to achieve the true potential, even in technological changes, managers need to carry out, need to see, need to look, need to change the structure and their behavioral aspect. Even though company with the fine-tuned structural and behavioral innovations, still if they have outdated technology, let's say they have very good employees, they also have good organizational structure, but technology is outdated, so they still cannot operate at their fullest potential. So all these strategies therefore must be comprehensive enough to provide interventions that are appropriate for the problems, taking considerations of all these strategies, structural, technology, and behaviorals. So inappropriate or limited strategies of change, that means limited means they only use one part, not the whole comprehensive one, may lead to ineffective result or may lead to a new emergence of problem. So it is important also to select a good OD intervention, suitable OD interventions. So there are many strategies, many methods and techniques for interventions. So OD strategy, when we talk about OD strategy, it involves the planning and the directions of the change programs. So OD intervention is referring to a range of actions, referring to the specific means, ways, goal, and so forth, activities and program in order to make change happen. So all the interventions aim at changing specific aspect of organizations, either in terms of climates, environments, member structures, and procedures. So organizational practice is inefficient if they fail to further their organizational objective. So the main of many organization is to make sure the objective, the goal could be achieved. So if let's say the organization practice or activities do not align with the objective, then the organization will become inefficient and ineffective. So in selecting a specific audit techniques, practitioner and clients need to consider the potential result of the technique that they choose, the potential implementation of the techniques in terms of cost, in terms of benefit, and so forth. And also to consider the potential acceptance of the techniques. Sometimes the technique they choose are not being accepted, are not being suitable for the problems that they're going to solve. And the result of the techniques, maybe they choose a wrong technique. So it is also need to know the potential result of the techniques. So many OD programs use combination, not just use one technique of intervention, but many OD programs utilize a multifaceted approach, a combination of intervention, not just one intervention technique. So several studies indicates that OD program that use more than one intervention techniques achieve better result than if they use just one. So it is important to use more than one, especially more, because OD is actually a dynamic discipline. Dynamics mean it's not static, so you cannot expect the issues, maybe what the issue is going to be or how it's going to be affecting others. So it is important to come up with many techniques, many intervention techniques, because of dynamic discipline or OD, the boundaries between what is OD and what is not OD is quite ambiguous and also ongoing changing. So the diverse technique, even though the diverse technique available, may use many of these because one of OD techniques is not intended to be all inclusive. That means one OD techniques, one OD interventions technique is not enough to solve the problems. So need to use the diverse technique available. So all OD techniques, that means all OD interventions aim at correcting the inefficiency, solving the problems, and so forth, but it's not enough to use one. Maybe one is not suitable for certain employees, So it needs to be used in combinations with the other techniques. So for example, the primary roles of audit techniques is to help the clients, especially in terms of diagnosing and solving their own problems. So in one way to choose or to categorize the intervention techniques, which intervention techniques are suitable, which intervention techniques are appropriate for the problems. One way is to categorize these intervention techniques based on the target system. So what is meant by target system? Target system is referring to these four categories. Either target system is for individual, for teams, or group, for intergroups, or for total organizational system. Let's say here for individual. So the problem is behavioral, or the strategy that the organization want to use is behavioral. And the target system is individual. So what the intervention that they can use, for example, they may use employee empowerment, they may use career plannings, they may use stress management or goal setting. So some of these are being covered by the textbook, some are not. So for your assignment, you can choose any of the one that being covered by the textbook. So let's say the problem with the organization is because it is in teams. So how to overcome? So the organization can come up with the interventions such as team building, role negotiations, goal settings. All these they can choose which one is more appropriate. So need to be used in combination. Let's say the target is the intergroup. So the organization can choose these all the interventions. Organizational mirror, intergroup developments, or TQM, total quality management. If let's say the organization want to improve the target is total organizational system. They want to improve the total organizational system for the behavioral strategy. They may use goal settings, survey feedback and research, action plan, TQM, all this. So it depends on their familiarity and their suitability for the problems. So let's say the structural, they want to use structural strategy. So for individual, they can use skill empowerment, job enrichment, team building. Intergroup, they can use goal setting. For total organizational system, they can use any of these. And also for technologies, you can see that some of the interventions sometimes redundant. For structural, for individual, they can use employee empowerments. For structural, still employee empowerments. So all these intervention can be redundant, that means overlaps. So you can choose any of these intervention depend on the target system. These individual team are the target, these are the strategy or the category. So the interventions are used in all these behavioral, structural, technological strategies. Certain interventions sometimes aim at individual improvements, others aim at group, at team, intergroup, and so forth. So single intervention may fit, for example, employee empowerments may fit into several other categories, may fit into behavioral, may fit into structural, and so forth. So the aspect of organization that is being changed, that's what aspect organization they want to change, and the problems that they are facing will determine what kind of interventions they need to select. Many intervention techniques do not fit into one category. For example, intervention, employee empowerment may not fit into one category, may not enough. Employee empowerment may not enough to be used in behavioral, but may also use other techniques. So many intervention techniques can be used in different category, not just one. So different types of change techniques suggest that the wide range of possible interventions available. So that means different types of techniques, different types of these techniques suggest that there are a wide range of possible intervention available that you can use, the OD practitioner can use in order to overcome the problems, solve the problems, come up with the solution and intervention. Okay, that's everyone. Thank you so much for your attention.